welcome to RPS Scotland's 23-24 talk events. And we're going to start off with Kit Martin, and I'll leave you to Kit to tell her all about herself and her, it's not just photography, it's art and everything mixed together. And it's going to be fascinating. Thank you very much, Kit.
Okay, well, thanks very much. So hello, everyone. Yeah, thanks again for inviting me along to speak tonight. It's a real privilege. This is not me at my most relaxed public speaking, even though it is over Zoom. But I am happy to be here. I will be reading from notes some of the time, and that's just because of nerves and just to keep me on track. So yeah, I've been introduced as an analogue photographer, amongst other things. And to some extent, I am analogue photographer, but I do use digital photography a lot. Both as it is and mixed in with analogue processes, as Steve kind of alluded to there. When people ask me, what sort of photographer are you? I'm not always sure what to say. Sometimes it's easier to say what I'm not. I'm not a wedding photographer, I'm not a landscape photographer, I'm not a commercial photographer. I am a photographer who likes trying things, and I like process and experimentation. I'm not striving for a perfect, sharp, glossy digital image, but for something that surprises and delights me. I love working with people in different ways, enthusing them and sharing processes with them, like Cyanotype. I also like learning from them. And I love working with museum collections, and I've been lucky enough to do this over the last few years, a few times, a few different museums. I love these quiet places filled with fascinating objects, each with their own story. So I'm going to start at when I began to learn formally about photography, and then I'll take a wander through my photographic journey. I'll stop and veer off into the cyanotype process for a wee while, just briefly, and then, yeah, continue on. So cyanotype and other experiments. Ooh. Next slide. Here we go. So this is going back to Derby, 91 to 94. I studied biological imaging. It was a new course at the time, and it was really interesting. I enjoyed it. It was kind of half a biology degree and half a photography, a bit of graphic design in there as well, degree. And it introduced me both to the cyanotype process and to microscopes, along with lots of other things. After this job, after this degree, I applied for various jobs and ended up working in medical photography. I kind of fell into it. It wasn't something I went looking for, but really enjoyed it. And this job skilled me up in how to take a decent, well-lit, standardized photo. I actually did a degree while I was there in medical illustration alongside it, so that was really interesting and useful as well. So as well as the photographic skills, it also taught me empathy and respect for my fellow humans. I was privileged to be photographing people who were, at times quite vulnerable and quite ill. I challenged myself after a few years of the medical photography to go and work for the police as a civilian in the police photography department. This was in Edinburgh now, Lothian and Borders Police. We were called out for major incidents and, murders, things like that. And I found it fascinating, and I liked being part of the crime-solving process, but I realised that I just couldn't really handle being on call. I didn't know what it was that I was going to be called out to do, and it didn't sit well with me, and I actually only lasted a year. I haven't got many photos from my time as a medical and police photographer, as I'm sure you realise. I put this one up because it is some sort of scene of death. It's a sudden death in a beehive. So that's why that one's up there. So after a complete change, I did a master's degree in environmental management. I actually did very little photography for a number of years. Apart from this, Reforesting Scotland were making a book called Woodlanders, New Life in Britain's Forests. And I had the privilege of taking some photos of some very interesting people who are linked with Scotland's woodlands in one way or another. So I and lots of other photographers have photos in this lovely book. So now moving on to 2011, and I've moved to Fife from Glasgow, and I've left my job at Zero Waste Scotland. It was one of the jobs I did after the environmental management degree. So I left that job because I wanted to get back to photography. I was missing it. I discovered the Bell Pettigrew Museum, which is a wonderful small Victorian zoology museum in St Andrews University. And I was kind of, you know, sniffing around there and taking some photos and chatting to the curator, and managed to wangle my way in slowly but surely into the behind the scenes, into the stores and things. Around the same time, I discovered Dundee Contemporary Arts across the water, and I took a one-day course in cyanotype and remembered how much I loved it. So a few years later, it was 2015 when I started working with a group of students who were studying museum and gallery studies at the university in St Andrews. They're doing a one-year master's learning how to curate. And I was lucky enough to be asked to work with them. So I made work all based around James Bell Pettigrew, who the museum is named after, and his work around flight. So the students put on an exhibition of my work, and it was called Skyward, and it was exhibited in 2016. So this let me do some different things, one of which was to work on a much larger scale with cyanotypes than I had done before. These are each about 50 by 70 centimetres, and I made quite a few of them. The process seemed to work well with these specimens, some of which were, you know, a bit discoloured, a bit boosty maybe, and it just showed them beautifully. And I also had the opportunity to work with fabric. This is a big silk panel which has been digitally printed, and that was thanks to some funding from Fife Contemporary, which was also very important to me at the time because it validated what I was doing and made me realise that I was on the right track. I also made some work which I displayed on light boxes, and I quite enjoyed doing that, and I have done that since as well. Digital printed onto Duratrans film and displayed them on light boxes. There's another specimen that was part of that exhibition, an atlas moth. So I did say I was going to kind of veer off and just talk about the process that's central to my photography practice, just briefly. And for those of you who are, you know, very aware of the process, sorry about this, but some of you maybe aren't quite so aware of cyanotype. So anyway, just tell you a little bit. It was discovered in 1842 by Sir John Herschel, and he was an English polymath, chemist, mathematician, astronomer, experimental photographer. He discovered how to fix the photographs that Daguerre and Fox Talbot were producing. And he indeed also coined the term photography, I believe, in 1839. So he wanted to copy his notes, and he realised that if he mixed two iron salts together, the emulsion was sensitive to UV light. So he would write notes with Indian ink on tracing paper, I believe, and he would coat pieces of paper with the emulsion, and then he could put the tracing paper onto the coated paper under glass outside, same way as I do now, and he could make copy after copy after copy. And by 1876, this sort of paper was being commercially coated, and by 1920, machine processed as the blueprint. So taken up by designers, architects, shipbuilders all over the world. And it was used until 1950s, until Diazo, I think, came in and photocopying and things. I also want to mention Anna Atkins, because she's an inspiration to me. She lived around the same time as Sir John Herschel, and their families knew each other. And she was an accomplished botanist and artist and experimental photographer. And she heard about this process and thought, oh, I'm gonna try this. And she decided she wanted to make a book representing British algae, seaweeds. So she collected specimens, dried them beautifully, along with a friend of hers who's also called Anna. And over the next 10 years, they made these beautiful books. And they're the first books to be printed and illustrated purely photographically. And you can see the wee labels there. Again, probably most of you are familiar with Anne Atkins, but just for anyone who isn't, I think they're just stunning. There's 3 more of our seaweed samples, and I took these from the Natural History Museum website. And the process, I've mentioned it's 2 iron salts. One is a red kind of crystally powder potassium ferrocyanide. The other one is a very powdery powder, and it's green, and it's ammonium ferric citrate. These are prepared each individually mixed with water and kind of stored separately, and they last for ages like that. And then when it's time to make prints, mix them together in equal quantities and coat whatever it is that you want to coat, whether it's paper, all sorts of different papers are possible, fabrics. People do it on wood. I haven't tried that yet. Stone as well. Glass I have tried, and gelatin is needed in order to hold the emulsion on the glass. And ceramics I've tried as well. So yeah, it's generally thought to be a contact printing method, because the substrate is coated with the emulsion, and then either a negative or objects are laid on top, and either under glass or not, depending how 3D they are, outside in the sun, exposed until the emulsion goes the color that you're looking for, which is a kind of silvery grey towards a kind of brown color when it's fully exposed. And then it's just a quick wash in water, and that's it. So very simple, straightforward process. And I've just put Mike Ware in the bottom there. He's a chemist who has developed and improved lots of kind of experimental darkroom processes. And he has something called new cyanotype, which I've not tried yet, but it's a different mix of the chemicals, and he thinks it produces even better results. So yeah, sticking with cyanotype and sticking with Bell Pettigrew Museum for a bit. When I was in the stores rittling around, I discovered these beautiful glass plate negatives and positives from the 1970s, and they were made by Professor Michael Laverack, who was a marine biologist, as well as being an accomplished artist. He was a printmaker as well, and photographer. And he took these photos, and they were all just stored in a drawer, and I thought it would be lovely to bring them out, because they're just beautiful, tiny little marine creatures in these photographs. And I was allowed to take photos of the glass plates and then make prints from them, and I had a small exhibition in St Andrews, and some of them are actually in the museum in one of the cases as well. Yeah, so yeah, and I mentioned this project because I do like to work with other people's work as well as making my own. So museum connections led me to being able to have an exhibition in 2019 in the Verdant Works, which is Dundee's Jute Museum. Lovely place. And part of the reason for this happening was I also went to ask to see the blueprints of Discovery Ship, the ship that's dry docked over in Dundee and is a museum in itself. They're fascinating, they're huge, they're beautiful. I think they were found in somebody's attic in Hull a few years ago, and now the museum in Dundee has them. So this exhibition that I had was about pollinating insects and the wildflowers that they depend on. And the wildflowers on the right here were actually specimens from the University of Dundee's Museum Herbarium. So they're old, beautifully captured specimens of wildflowers. And on the left, it was a huge bit of fabric, actually, a wall hanging, digitally printed, and it's a little solitary bee that I found outside my house dead. I've got solitary bee houses, and I really enjoy watching them in the spring and summer coming and going. And anyway, I made this into a big piece of fabric. Yeah. Other things in that exhibition, again, cyanotype on fabric, and still working with fabric, linen, printing on linen. I just wanted to mention this because mostly I work quite kind of low tech, and I do use Photoshop, obviously, when I'm working with digital photography, but minimally. But occasionally I'll do something a bit more adventurous, like on the left, I had a photograph of a garden tiger moth, and I made it into this design on a big piece. I think it was 140 millimeters square piece of fabric. And on the right, again, it's quite low tech to start with. It was some photos of forget-me-nots and tiny little plants and stamens that I took through just a hand magnifying lens, and then just made them into this wall hanging in Photoshop. So experimenting with cyanotype, kind of out with the contact printing method. I like to do this occasionally as well. And I have gone down to the seashore, and I've occasionally done it at the riverside as well, after researching the toxicity of the chemicals, obviously, and being sure that I wasn't going to harm any, of the habitats that I was working in, because that's the last thing I'd want to do. So yeah, what I've done is coated paper, taken it down to the seashore in a portfolio case, hidden away, and then taken out, one piece at a time, and worked making the print with the kind of tide and time. So water is kind of washing some of the chemicals away while the sun is hitting the paper, and just interesting things are happening. Top left is kind of halfway, well, it's when the exposure is ready to be washed, but before it's been washed. And I love some of the colours that are present then. And sometimes I take a photo at that stage because I just think they're beautiful. And I've made some cards actually out of photographs that I've taken at that stage. Top right is the same image, but after a wash. And you can see so it's the oxygen in water that turns the browny grey to the cyanotype Prussian blue. So it's an exhilarating, unpredictable and frustrating process, but it can produce some really interesting results. And I think the three of them together looks like a woman's head and neck and shoulders, but I'm not sure that other people see that. And this one I just wanted to show because it represents me not wanting to waste things. I feel it's quite important. I have sort of alluded to the fact I worked for Zero Waste Scotland in the past. So I've made this print at the seashore. I haven't particularly loved it, but I've kept it. And then when I've been away with a friend who has a printing press, I've printed just using actual fresh plants and ink onto some of these bits of paper, and I actually really like how this has ended up. So yeah. I also want to mention, with regard to the cyanotype process, its wonderful accessibility. This panel was made with young adults with additional support needs in central Fife. They wanted a big fabric wall piece to go on the wall of the place that they meet, because it was quite an echoey room and they wanted to try and dull that a bit. So each person made an individual piece on fabric, and then I just sewed them all together in this backing. And I mean, I've also worked with young artists as young as 3 doing this process. I've got to mention workshops because they are central to my freelance work, and I do really enjoy doing them. So I mainly do workshops in cyanotype, both on paper and fabric, and pinhole photography, and I do argyrotype as well. They're the main ones. So although, yeah, I was just thinking about them, they're a huge amount of work, especially if I'm traveling with all my stuff to do a workshop and back again. But I do really enjoy them, and I always love meeting the people that come along, and, you know, they ask me interesting questions and they make me think about it in different ways. And I just love sharing the process with them. And these, it's just a selection of some of the places and people that I've done workshops with, including Off the Rails at Ladybank, Cooper Corn Exchange, we set up a darkroom in there, DCA, Lauriston Castle, Perth Museum, and yeah, other places. So yeah, workshops are central to what I do. Other experiments beyond cyanotype. So argyrotype, or argyrotype, I think it can be pronounced either. I tend to say argyrotype. So it's a similar kind of process to cyanotype, but 1 silver salt and 1 iron salt, and it produces this beautiful kind of brown image rather than the blue. The silver salt is silver sulfonate, and the iron is ferric ammonium citrate. And there's an extra stage to this process beyond the cyanotype process, which is just fixing in sodium thiosulfate. So yeah, it's again coating the paper with the chemicals, keeping that in the dark till it's dried, putting on a negative or objects and exposing it in the sun, fixing it, washing it. And these are all specimens from Bell Pettigrew Museum again. They asked me to make some prints for them. And these are seaweed that I've used just directly on the coated paper. So this process, again, was developed by Mike Ware as a more stable alternative to Van Dyke and argentotype. Lumen prints. I love doing these, and I plan to do more of these, partly because I have got quite a stash now in my little darkroom. I've got a darkroom in my garage, very lucky to have that now, and I've got various papers that people have given me, expired, out of date, darkroom papers, because I don't tend to say no when people offer me them, and I think I've even picked some up from Free Cycle as well. Because lumen prints are, for anyone that's not aware of the process, are made with darkroom papers, but outside the darkroom, again using UV light rather than darkroom light, to make images, and results in all sorts of colours appearing in these darkroom papers, excuse me. So the UV light triggers a chemical reaction that doesn't occur in normal darkroom exposure. It's a reaction with the silver halides and not the metallic silver atoms. Also, the UV reacts with unknown compounds in the emulsion in the papers, breaking them down and releasing further unknown molecules. Some of these molecules are less stable than others, and that's why when it comes to fixing these lumen prints, sometimes the colour really fades away because the molecules are not stable. So these, I've basically put plants onto photographic paper and taken them outside under glass for like 2 to 3 hours in summer for some of these. There's some more. different plants. I love the little glow that you sometimes get around the plants where moisture has come out and reacted with the paper as well. These are all fibre-based papers. I find that I generally like the results more with fibre-based papers than with resin-coated, but I've still got a lot more trials to do. That's what I found so far. As well as making them with kind of fresh plants, I also made prints with animals. This is a pheasant, and it was a pheasant that sadly died. Somebody had killed it with their car, basically. So I have decided to make a print with some of these animals that I've found. I was doing this over the kind of COVID pandemic period, to the extent that people were actually contacting me saying, I've seen a herring gull on the side of the A92, or, you know, I've got a pigeon, what will I do with it? And yeah, I decided that I want to immortalize these birds, animals, in a piece of art, and then at the end I give them back to nature for nature to do its thing with them. The birds are quite a long exposure, about 48 hours. So pheasant. This is a herring gull. This one was actually exhibited in the RSA in Edinburgh. Another herring gull, quite big, 4 bits of paper. And a little young rabbit. And I love all the colours that have appeared around the edge, particularly, and also in the middle of the rabbit. There's silver there that you can't see very clearly, but it's beautiful. It's quite metallic. A couple more birds, a wood pigeon and a swallow. So yeah, I also want to mention anthotypes as another experimental process that I have tried, and I actually definitely plan to do more of this with a project that I'm going to be doing over the coming year. Sir John Herschel was actually working with anthotypes. He called them a different name, it's just slipped my mind, but yeah, way back in the 1840s. And this is basically, I suppose, the most environmentally friendly photographic technique you can find. It's also very, very slow. But basically, the long and short of this is, for anyone that's interested and doesn't know, plant material mashed up with a little bit of alcohol or vinegar. I've used spinach here with a bit of vodka, and I then strained it and painted it onto paper, 2 coats, and then top left, I've put plant materials onto the paper, and then I've taken it outside under glass and left it for, well, this was the best part of a day, quite a few hours. Spinach is quite fast at disappearing, because as you can see, all the areas around the plants that the sun has hit has faded away and left a photographic impression of what was there. Some take much, much longer. You know, you can leave them out for a couple of weeks. So ideally, to do this process, you would have a proper kind of contact frame that you can open up the back of and, you know, look under the paper and see how it's getting on. Photograms, yeah, I enjoy doing these in the darkroom using photographic paper in its proper correct way. Some little glass vessels on the right and some seaweed on the left. Pinhole I want to mention because, as I said earlier, that's another of the workshop kind of classes that I like to do with people. And in fact, I've got one coming up at Dundee Contemporary Arts on the 29th of October. So I'm looking forward to that. And during the course of the day, we will be making a camera like the one on the left there, which is made from black card and a bit of a drinks can and some tape and glue. There's a little pinhole in the front, obviously, and it's 5 by 4 inch size. So what I like to do is take along standard darkroom paper, but also Harman direct positive paper, because I think it's lovely for people, particularly people who haven't maybe made photos in the darkroom before. to see an image coming out of the developer and it's positive. They can really see what it is. So yeah, we work with positive and negatives. And yeah, that's a friend of mine on the right experimenting with a pinhole, moving about so that she's part lumen, part tree. I love the slow and experimental thing about this process. It's the opposite of, you know, taking a photo with my phone. So, oh yeah, and that's during the day. We also use some other cameras made from whiskey tubes and things. And yeah, you can get quite, I think you can get some really quite interesting results. And solar graphs, just touch on them. Basically tiny little pinhole cameras, aren't they? With these are film canisters, camera film canisters, and I've just put a bit of paper inside and I've attached them to a fence post facing south near my house and just left them for 2 weeks to see what information they gather, and lovely results. These are just scanned in afterwards. They're not fixed or developed or anything. They're just scanned in. 2 week exposures, I think I said that. And yeah, so this brings me to, so now it's March 2022 and I get the opportunity to go up to Lewis, to Achmore on Lewis, and spend 10 days at Mary Law's. Now Steve called Mary Barry and I'm thinking now I have pronunciation wrong and I've been calling her the wrong name. Anyway, to Mary's Island Darkroom. And this was just kind of the first residency I've been on and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I was there on my own. I was staying in the Bothy pod, which is in the middle picture there. And I was making use of Mary's darkroom, which she has next to her kind of workshop area on her croft. And yeah, I took my 5x4 Intrepid camera up with me with the intention of kind of getting to know it a bit better, because I'd had it for some time, but I hadn't really done very much with it, certainly not away from the house. And it was challenging. It was stormy and cold, very windy at times. We had a proper storm one night. It was quite good fun. But yeah, I experimented with double exposures and quite liked some of my results. Got a Callanish stone mash up on the right, and inside the bothy, and that's just a very long pinhole exposure. I've got a pinhole board as well as a lens for my Intrepid camera. So this led me to taking this photo, which is of Mary, double exposed with the inside of the bothy. And as I think Steve mentioned at the start, I entered this into the Richard Cowan Scottish Portrait Award in photography last year, and I was just delighted and surprised for it to win. So yeah, that was wonderful. And yeah, so I'll be making better use of my Intrepid from now on. I've actually had a bit of a break because of what I've been doing over the last year. I haven't been using it, but I will get back to that. So before and after my time on Lewis, I was looking at moths and caterpillars. I was doing some moth trapping with experts, trying to learn a bit about the creatures, as well as getting back into a museum, this time the National Museum of Scotland, into the stores there. Ashley Whiffen is the curator there, and she kindly, got some specimens out for me and let me photograph them in her office area. Again, it's quite low tech, digital, but just lit with desk lamps and microscope lights and things. And this is a project that I will return to, and yeah, to see where it takes me. Mixed in with all this moth photography is my fascination with Maria Sibylla Merian. She was an artist and an ecologist, very accomplished artist, painter and printer, and a wonderful ecologist way before her time in Germany and the Netherlands in the late 1600s, 1700s. And yeah, I just think she is fascinating. So as I say, that's something I'm going to be going back to. So this brings me up to last September, and the wonderful and intense year at Duncan of Jordanson College of Art and Design in Dundee, which I've just finished. I just had my degree show in August. The proposal when I applied for the course was based around the moths and Maria Sibylla Merian that I've just mentioned, but this soon changed, and I became enchanted with tiny things, worlds within worlds. First of all, looking at oak galls and the little wasps that cause the oak galls to come into being, and all the little ecosystems that are inside an oak gall. And then I settled on mosses and the worlds in and amongst mosses for my degree show work. And I'm just getting to start to know about mosses. And yeah, they're just fascinating. I had a basic student microscope acquired from St Andrews University a few years ago. I've had it just sitting there. I cleaned it up, started looking at mosses and pond water from mossy, boggy areas, and a whole new world opened up, and I was smitten. And bottom right here is one of my favourite little microscopic creatures. It's called a gastrotrip, and I think it's like a tiny little microscopic otter, the way it moves around, and it's kind of hairy. It's just wonderful. So yeah, creatures, I was looking at creatures, I was looking at cellular structures, and yeah, just everything that's in pond water and in mosses. So also over at the university, I had access to scanning electron microscope and confocal microscopes, as well as you know, much more powerful stereo microscopes in compound. And the confocal is what produced these images. And it kind of acts a bit like a CT scanner in that it makes a stack of images through a tiny, tiny little microscopic piece of moss, which can then be used in different ways. So these are just single images, but I also took a stack, and the stack of images from the confocal microscope were sent over to software in the digital making lab at the college, and they went into 3D software, and I was able to produce a 3D print on the right there of this piece of sphagnum moss from a peat bog. Then I was able to take it into the foundry and make a sculpture from that 3D model out of bronze, and that's on the left there. And that's just something I didn't know I was going to be able to do when I started the course. I absolutely loved it. I had tried casting in the first term using oak galls and acorns, and I'd loved that, and this was development from that. So yeah, it was a whole process. There's a huge amount in there, but this is what I ended up with. I'm very happy with it. Also, these files made me think about layers and glass, and because I was working with microscope slides, I was drawn to glass. So I ended up getting the laser to engrave onto glass, lots and lots of different pieces of glass, and displaying them all together in a light box. I also, of course, did some cyanotypes from scanning electron microscope images. I tried all sorts of different things as well, all based, you know, from my photographic images, but veering off in different directions: waterless lithography, etching. and laser cutting paper, just looking at the shadows and things formed from that. And on the right is actual little microscope slides that I laser engraved, sorry, not cut, laser engraved, and displayed them as well. Quite difficult to see them, you can see better in the shadow. It's rotifers that I found in pond water that are engraved onto them. I've also ended up doing some projection on and through paper. And I've also, I've made some films even from my microscope footage, and I've displayed them on little old-fashioned TVs. Also managed to get into textiles and do some screen printing on fabric. It's just been absolutely amazing, and yeah, just so glad I did it. So photography still, but much wider. And so my degree show work finished and was taken down end of August, but I was very lucky to be asked to move it basically to somewhere else within the university. It's Life Space Gallery, which is in life sciences, and it's there at the moment. I've added a couple of bits in, and I've also got some moss specimens from the university museum as well, which adds to it really nicely, I think. That's on until the 10th of November. There's an open evening on the 2nd of November that anyone is welcome to come to, between 6 and 8. It's otherwise not that easy to get in and out of Life Space Gallery because it's in the Life Sciences building. I don't have a pass, but if anyone was interested, if anyone lives in the area and was interested in seeing it, just get in touch with me and I can sort that out. I also just want to mention that I'll be at the Dundee Botanic Garden. If anyone wants to come and say hello this coming Saturday, it's National Moss Day, and I'm going to be exhibiting some work. And also my course leader, Alan, is bringing 2 microscopes, and we're going to be having a look through them and letting people have a look at mosses. There's also some very interesting talks, and yeah, various excellent artists with their work on display. So finally, I just want to bring this to an end by saying that by having made really good use of all the workshops at the college and taking photography down the microscope in various new directions for me, I'm still distilling all this really, while I'm also planning my next projects. I am going to be working with another artist called Kirsty Bogle. We're going to be based at the Dundee Botanics for the next year, and we're going to be working on a project that's exploring the bioregion of Tayside, and that's really looking at all the tributaries that feed into the Tay and the Tay itself and all the communities and natural history that's in that area. So we're not sure exactly what it's going to be yet, but I know that I'm going to be delving into even more experimental photography during this process. And I've mentioned sustainable darkroom here because I just want to bring them to people's attention if you're interested, and if you haven't heard of them already. They're a group which was started up by Hannah Fletcher and other people, and they do very interesting things, looking at different ways of approaching darkroom photography that are less toxic and more natural, including the top left there. I've made developer from last year's Christmas tree. It's making developers from natural plant-based materials, coffee, mint, rosemary, all sorts of things. I hope actually soon to be joining a workshop that is looking at making developer from moss. So that would tie in nicely. So yeah, I see the microscope still playing a role whilst also delving into this world a little bit more than I have already. And I'm looking forward to seeing where this takes me. That's it. Thank you very much.
Perfect. If you could stop sharing your screen just now, we'll get everybody back in. Got a few questions that have came in already.
Oh, sorry, I am trying to. I can't find the... There's no cursor. It's vanished.
Cursor, when you lose your cursor. There we go.
There we are. Thank you.
So the questions kind of follow on from one another, I suppose. The first one is how do you get the text on the cyanotype? Is it just a straight print it on black and then just leave it on the thing, just like any other piece of artifact that you put on?
Yeah. So, and I suppose in the same way as John Herschel was doing it, you can actually make marks on a piece of tracing paper or a piece of acetate. So that could be writing with a Sharpie pen or a Posca pen or something, something that will, make it black, or print from a computer, a printer onto acetate or tracing paper, and just lay it on top like a negative.
And then on the lumen prints, how do you fix and develop them? Do you just put it through a normal process after that?
Oh yeah, I didn't mention that, did I? So yes, it's fixing. It's fixing in standard photographic fixer, just a bit more dilute. Yeah, fixing and washing.
And then the last technical question was on the people who created the 3D image. So I guess this is the software. So what was the software that created the 3D? Yeah, print for the printing part of it. Do you know what that was called again?
No, there's a few, and I'm not sure what. That was such a process. I'm not sure what Rob, he's the technician in the workshop over at the college, used. There's one called Rhino. I'm sorry, I don't know exactly. Yeah.
There was a program on the screen. It's been recorded, so back and look at that when she's watching the recording. So,
I think it does say
okay.
What I wrote down at the time was software in the digital and then something or other. So I didn't know whether that was the name of a company or it's that was the name of some software. I may have to look back at the video. You're right.
Yeah.
See what you said.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that part of it was very much me just moving the images from the confocal microscope, which was over in Life Sciences, eventually with lots of problems. But anyway, we managed to do it, moving them onto Rob, the technician's computer. He deals with the software. It's not software that I would claim to know. So yeah.
Quite an in-depth process. And what comes across the work really is layers, in both physical and metaphysical layers. Some of you're layering images on top of each other, as well as layering meanings on top of each other. And taking roadkill animals effectively and putting them on paper. I'm amazed at how long some of these exposures are. You're talking a week and a couple of days and 2 weeks exposures.
I know.
And then you don't know what you're going to get out of it, really, do you?
Nope. You don't.
It's just educated, serendipitous guess, I guess. Isn't that how it works?
And sometimes disappointment.
Yeah. I suppose that'll happen quite often as well.
Yeah,
quite happen. And comparing that to modern digital photography, which I'm sure most people here are more out there with, as you say, their phone or their cameras, which is, bang, you've got your image and away you go. You can spend hours doing the processing, but yeah, your process, a lot of those processes you've been experimenting with are quite slow and laborious, and yeah,
I do enjoy that, definitely. I do enjoy I've got lots and lots of photos on my phone as well. I mean, I do a lot of that too, but yeah, I like the slow stuff.
So would you say patience is one of your greatest virtues then? Is that kind of?
Not always, no. I mean, the air can be quite sort of blue down at the beach, for example.
That's not with the cyanotype stuff then, yeah?
Trying to make a print, and then the wind just whips it and off it goes onto the sand, and it was looking great, and then it's not. Yeah, not always patient.
Yeah. Doing it on the stone, the sides of the water there. I presume that's the Tay you were on. That must be quite a fascinating process as well, to see these things come alive in front of your face.
I'm
You
so
watch
sorry, I didn't hear the first bit there. Which were you talking about there?
down at the side, I presume at the side of the Tay, when you were putting the stuff in the edge of the water and getting the stoat in the water to reflect through. Was that, were you washing them in the water as well, the Tay, or were you taking them away and washing them somewhere else? Or?
Yeah, I mean, I have done it down at Wermouth Bay, but those ones were more over at St Monans,
Okay.
in the sea. Yeah, just washing them in the sea itself.
Salt water. Okay.
The salt adds to it a little bit. Yeah.
Fascinating bunch of quite a fascinating way of looking at it all, isn't it?
Yeah.
World, as you say, it's almost like your stuff with the microscopes. There's a hidden world out there that we just wander past.
I know, and it's utterly fascinating. I mean, the hours I've spent looking down a microscope, over the last year, a lot of hours. But what I haven't found yet, and what everybody tells me, they always see when they look at mosses, are tardigrades. I've not seen a tardigrade yet, but I'll keep looking because it's quite something.
That's that patience thing again. I guess it will come back. That will come at some point. Yeah. Anybody else get any other questions they want to ask? I'm hogging the place here.
I was just going to say that, as you alluded to, really, that it's been kind of proven that the chemicals, when they're washed off the cyanotypes, are not actually, they're not detrimental to, fish or any kind of, any kind of wildlife, which is, I mean, like really good for me because at home we have a septic tank. So I don't want to put horrible chemicals down into the septic tank, but cyanotype is fantastic.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It's another reason I enjoy using it, because I know it's fairly low toxicity. Yeah,
I think that's a definite plus. And it's, as you say, it's accessible to everybody of every age.
Yeah.
And it's produces sometimes unpredictable but fascinating results.
Absolutely. Oh, so do you work with that process yourself? Yeah.
I do, yes. And now I was just looking actually while we've been listening to you, there came a little message about the Creative Eye group and the digital exhibition and the images that were accepted, and of the ones that I put in, the cyanotype has been accepted as my image. So I was pleased with that.
Oh, congratulations.
It either means I take rubbish digital photographs because those weren't accepted, but the cyanotype I did love.
Oh, very good.
I would go on the bright side and just say that you take great digital photographs, but the cyanotype one was even better.
Even better.
Well, absolutely. Yeah, thank you.
It's even better. I look forward to see that in the Creative Eye exhibition when it comes around. Well, we'll call the night quits. I think at that I'll wrap up and just say thank you very much, Kit, for sharing your journey, which has been quite varied. And it's gone from, it's a pity Dave couldn't be here tonight, because Dave, he is a current police scenes of crime officer. That's his job. So it's a pity he can't be here tonight. But so it's gone from photographing murders in Edinburgh to photographing moss in Dundee. And that's quite a jump from one to the other, but quite a journey, quite fascinating insight into how it all works and who you've been and what you've been doing. And I'll just end by saying that, they always say that a rolling stone gathers no moss, but you're rolling along and you've stopped at moss. So that seems to be just to buck the trend. You rolling stones stopped at moss, and who knows where moss will take you. Moss will take you, I'm sure, even further than this.
Yeah, it's taken me places already. It's great.
Okay, good.